All right, welcome in to the Big Hitters Only podcast. We may have some new listeners today for this post-game reaction show. So if you're new, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and we need you to rate, review, subscribe, and tell your friends, hey guys, we're bringing you this content right now for free. I drove all the way from Chapel Hill back to record at 5 p.m. with Mike Hardison. So tell your friends, get another listener on, and then rate us, review us, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. It really helps. And just tell a friend. That's the key. All right, Mike. UNC loses to JMU in an embarrassing fashion, 70-50. The score does not indicate how bad this was. The halftime score, I got to pull it up, was
53-21.
53-21. JMU's offense went off in the first half. It was the most points by JMU in a half ever. And the final was the most points UNC has given up in Kenan Stadium ever. And I think the most points total with UNC adding 50 to that. A bunch of offensive records for James Madison. It was embarrassing. And I think we start there and just kind of I don't think talking about the game is kind of where this podcast is going to go. I think it's more about direction of the program, Mack Brown, and kind of what this loss means. Just give me your initial thoughts, and we'll go from there and kind of see where this show takes us. I had a 60-minute drive to think about it.
Yeah. This is one of those games where you're going to look at the score, you're going to wonder what happened. I had friends text me in the middle of this game checking for wellness checks. That is how it's being seen and perceived by everyone across the college football landscape. If you did a cursory look on Twitter today, UNC was the laughing stock of basically every national pundit. We hit the over in the game with about 8 minutes left in the second quarter. We have been talking about subpar UNC defenses for what feels like the better part of a decade now. We've gone through multiple iterations of different defensive coordinator staffs, and it's not working. We have seen really good recruiting with Mack Brown. We've seen decent recruiting with Mack Brown and kind of this 25 to 40-ish range of recruiting with Mack Brown. Given that sample size, given how many recruiting classes have come through here, I don't think you can just, blatantly say it's a talent problem. We've had talent come through, especially on the defensive end. At a certain point with leadership, and this is the tough conversation, but it has to be had. At a certain point with leadership, when you change things multiple times, the accountability starts and ends at the top. And so here we are again. Carolina given up in week 4 in incredibly embarrassing defensive performance against a team that is not Power 5 or Power 4 now. And we are left scratching our heads and wondering what the answer is. We already know the ceiling for the season now is pretty finite. I mean, I think we'll be lucky to get to 7 or 8 wins at this point, which has been kind of the Mack Brown standard at this point. And the question I have, and I'd love to hear your input here, is what are we doing moving forward? What is the future of Mack Brown? Because for me, it just feels like we're at he's 72, we're 6 years in, and we are still having the same problems that we had season 1. So what's the answer?
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk small here first. This is the worst loss in Mack Brown's tenure since he came back. So this is year 6. And I was listening to Tar Heel Sports Network on the drive home, Chapel Hill to Greensboro, and Mack Brown said it. He said, this cannot happen in year 6. It's no shit.
Yeah.
Because he has his recruiting classes in. You can't say we don't have the talent in year 6. You can't say you didn't hit the transfer portal because you came late. You can't blame it on quarterback depth because that's part of the job to get the right quarterbacks in. You can't blame it on defensive coordinators because it's your job to hire. You can't let this happen in year 6. And so you're sitting here. I mean, it's not even against. There were some bad losses last year against Virginia and Georgia Tech. When you're scratching your head, you're God, we should not be losing to these teams that have new coaches with Mack Brown in year 5 with Drake May at the helm. This is JMU. None of these players got recruited by UNC. The quarterback went to my high school, Alonzo Barrett. I think he only had one one group of 5 Division I offer, and it was JMU. And he was a very low, he's going to play Division I, but it's JMU, or maybe Division II or somewhere else. And
Yeah.
he tore Division I athletes, ACC athletes up. And I put on the staff a lot in terms of preparation. Clearly, JMU's staff did not show anything against Charlotte, and it definitely didn't show anything against Gardner-Webb. Gardner-Webb are they Division II? Are they FCS?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think they're FCS.
They're not Division I. Power a group of 5. I think there might be FCS. And they scored 13 points against Gardner-Webb, which is a very, very small private school in like western part of the state.
Yeah.
They obviously, and they put 70 on UNC. That's crazy. So that's on the staff, like not adjusting, and not being ready, not getting their players ready, looking ahead to Duke, thinking JMU because they are a group of 5, because they're in the Sun Belt, not preparing them, not coming out, and then things just fell off. It didn't help that there were turnovers and some big mistakes in the first and second quarter. I point to the punt block. That was a scoop and score.
Yep.
And then immediately after that was the onside kick that led to another touchdown. And we can get
You're also forgetting the 2-point conversion where we were just asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, JMU staff, kudos to them. New staff, too. This is a new head coach coming from Holy Cross that came in and beat. I mean, this is going to be a signature win for him. He could probably parlay JMU this job in 1 or 2 years to a Power 4 job. So it's on the staff not getting the players ready, and then it's on the defensive secondary linebackers not getting enough pressure on just so many players running free in UNC's defensive secondary for long gains, for touchdowns. And then, and the game was over in the first half. So at that point, it's like, I mean, how demoralized is the team, and can they save face? And look, they did. I mean, credit to the offense. They came out and scored, but it's just never going to be enough in the second half. 70-50, like I said at the top, doesn't tell the story of the game. It might have well been 70-20 with kind of how the game was decided pretty much in the second quarter.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll give credit to the offense as well for continuing to kind of chip away. Obviously, the stakes are much different in the second half when you're up 30 at halftime, right? Like, I'm not going to, like, pat everyone on the back and say, congrats to Jacoby Criswell for having 485 yards or, Martin and Hampton having 3 touchdowns. Like, that's all well and good, like, in the stat book. But, like, at the end of the day, JMU, like, knew that they had the game in hand already. I keep coming back to, like, I'm a big culture guy, right? Like, I think firmly, like, when you are able to handle adversity and when you're able to handle stress is when you have a strong culture in place of knowing that, like, buying into the process and being able to trust the guys next to you and trust the coaching staff that they have the right play calls for you. I think the defensive culture at Carolina since Mack Brown has returned, and even before that Larry Fedora era, has been abysmal, right? They collapse immediately. And you saw that so close. Like in the second quarter, it was completely emblematic of the problems that we've had under Mack Brown 2.0, which is a bad break happens, and how do they respond? They just kind of continue to fall in on themselves. They make a bonehead play. How do they respond? They give up an even bigger play. And it's just one of those things where, I'm less upset about the huge lapses in the secondary. I'm less upset about the just really dumb mistakes that we made. It is all about how you respond to those mistakes. And the biggest issue I have is clearly the coaching staff has not like enforced or like implemented a right cultural mindset and able to kind of bounce back from mistakes.
Yeah.
They compound.
Yeah, it's like no adjustments, not like no leadership. There's got to be some player-led leadership when there are mistakes. Like, all right, let's figure this out. Let's go to the sideline. And like, what is happening? Like, all right, they scored on us. Let's go back and figure out, like, what are they doing that's allowing them to run free? And let's not, like you said, let one mistake compound. And there weren't any adjustments. There weren't any in-game adjustments. That's on the coaching. And there doesn't seem like there's any, like, leadership. It'd be interesting to see, like, during player interviews this week, who steps up? What are they going to look like against Duke? I mean, this is one of those games where it's like, all right, if they don't come out against Duke, things could get ugly really quick with players looking to transfer, with coaches looking to save their ass because they got to figure out, all right, if I'm going to get fired, what's the next job? This is a game where you get beat so bad it can derail the season. And I think any game where you put up you give up 53 in the first would be that result, but it's compounded by the fact that this JMU at home, and what I was calling, like, it's essentially the biggest game of the home slate. Like, it was like the home opener in my eyes. Maybe it's because the first game I went to. But, and they just laid a complete egg. Culture, Yeah, I mean, it falls on the head coach. I don't know. I'm not inside the building, but
Yeah.
three defensive coordinators in 6 years. You had some hope for Jeff Collins. I mean, I was listening to some IC podcasts about how they're pretty good in the first 3 games, which is so surprising how they looked today. It's almost like JMU was a lot better than we thought, and it showed. And now, like, let me just go through some stats here. We kind of move to like a broader scheme here. I had Jones Angel in my ear driving in here. So JMU had 611 offensive yards. UNC had 616. So UNC offense moved the ball, but it was kind of at the point where they were just throwing in the second half because they had to catch up. Jacoby Criswell, despite some really bad turnovers, I mean, I thought it just compounded in the second quarter with that pick six after the muff punt and after the onside kick. But he was 28 for 48 for 475. I mean, he threw the ball. He looked good. First quarter, I thought he had some great throws. Thought we were getting players open. 3 touchdowns. But I didn't think they protected him very well. We can get to that as well. JMU rushed the ball for 223 yards. Let's see, they had 25 first downs. UNC had 30 first downs. So really the stats don't tell, but the big one here, 5 turnovers for UNC. Only 1 turnover by JMU, but they recovered it, so they didn't give it the ball away. UNC lost 3 fumbles. UNC gave up 2 sacks. JMU gave up 3 sacks. So really it was those big, dynamic, explosive plays by JMU and the timely turnovers, which kind of blew the game open in the second quarter. UNC outscored JMU in the second half, but the game was over at halftime. Anything that stood out to you stat-wise, player-wise? I mean, Alonzo Burnett, hang on real quick, 22 for 34 for 388 yards and 5 touchdowns. He also rushed the ball 13 times for 99 yards. That's sack adjusted for 2 touchdowns, an average of 7.6 yards per carry. George Pettaway, 87 yards on 16 carries.
Yeah, one more highlight for one of the defensive players on JMU. Last name was Spence. He had, I believe, 2 interceptions and was involved in that block punt return. So a little bit of do everything. I mean, you have to tip your hat to JMU no matter what problems you have with Carolina, right? Like they came in with a game plan. That coach seems like he's got his players to buy in, which is something I'm envious of. And they beat the brakes off Carolina, right? With regards to your leadership point, like I know you were at the game. Kamen Rucker, they spotlighted from the ACC network, kind of trying to hype up the defensive players, like in the early to the second half. You could tell it's killing him not to be out there. And I do wonder how much of that is like when you lose your defensive leader on the field, how much that actually impacts how you play. But with that being said, that huge caveat being said, it shouldn't really be responsible for one player to basically hold the defense together, right? Like we're just seeing like. I mean, and I think we had 2 sacks. So I think it was Bo Atkinson and Kevin Hester both had a sack. I mean, come on, what are we doing? Like that JMU offensive line was so undersized, and our guys look talented. They look like they scare you coming into the building, and their offensive line was just handling us. And alternatively, our offensive line, there was one play where Criswell got drilled. I think he got the ball off in time, but he got drilled because they brought a blitz, and none of our guys picked it up. So it's not like the talent. It's just again, it comes back to me is like eventually the accountability, you have to look at who's in charge, right? Like, and I think the broader conversation, we hit on all the points of the game. Special teams was awful. And we did get a block punt and scoop and sort later in the second half, but special teams by and large is awful. Missing the onside kick, missing the easy 2-point conversion, getting the punt blocked, just really set the tone early on. And I think that really kind of contributed to the, they caught Carolina on their back foot.
Yeah.
Defense just across the board, secondary looked awful. We weren't generating pressure like we should have against JMU, which makes me terrified for the rest of the ACC season. But I think we need to get into the larger conversation, and I'd love your opinion here.
Yeah.
Like, is this the beginning of the end?
Let me jump in real quick before we start that. It just shows you how important special teams can be because that derailed UNC, the block punt for a touchdown, and then the two-point conversion, and then the onside kick. That just shows you the importance of opportune, explosive plays can just rattle a team. And it was kind of over from there. I think it was a couple turnovers mixed in after that by UNC. Kudos to Jacoby Criswell. He was tough. He made some good throws. I mean, he did not have much time back there. So despite the result, I think he's the guy moving forward.
Yes.
Scrambled a little bit. I mean, everybody talks about how heavy he is. He looks like a big guy out there. It's kind of funny. It's like everybody's calling him fat. But he made throws. He threw the ball downfield. He made some plays, and I thought some receivers kind of popped up. All right, larger scheme, beginning to the end. Go ahead. You take
Yeah, no, I wanted your opinion, man. Like, is this the beginning of the end of the Mack Brown 2.0 era? Because I have a firm opinion, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Taylor Vipolis kind of tweet something like that.
Yeah.
Look, it's got to end at some point. Like, he's not going to coach forever. He's 72, and this is a loss. We were talking about in the press box. Like, what does this mean? Like, could this be a bad enough loss where it's like, all right, you can't lose to JMU. You can't have JMU come in on one of our home games and allow them to put 70 points on us, 53 in the first half. Like, you can't let that happen. And he did that. It's embarrassing. And it's all about donors. Like, it's not, I don't think Bubba's making this decision. It's the donors putting pressure on Mack and on Bubba. And if you don't have the money coming in, then you can't make that kind of decision. And I know Matt, I mean, dude, I don't have sources on this, but Matt, dude, he's good with the donors. He's good with the guys that have the money to support this program and to support NIL. They help make decisions. They're the ones who paid Larry Fedora's buyout. They're the ones who brought Mack in. They may be the same guys that take Mack out. Like, at what point do they turn? At what point does Bubba say, hey, look, we got to look towards the future. We can't be losing to JMU if we want to compete with Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina in the SEC. So let's pull the plug now. Let's get through the season. Let's pull the plug now. Let's have a complete reset. Let's find the guy moving forward because we're just treading water. We talked about this with Julian. We're treading water, and if you're losing teams like JMU and struggling against Georgia Tech and Virginia, which I think it's going to be like this all year. It's going to be close games. Because I don't think there's a really bad team in the ACC right now. Like Boston College looks good. Florida State may be an easier matchup, but these teams, it's not really a good team, but there's not really any awful teams either. So UNC is going to be a middle of the road, if not below average to average team. So I do think this will be the game people point to, similar to some moments during the Fedora era as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, one key point, especially when we talk about donors, right? Who are the key stakeholders? And it's who's giving the money, and then Bubba, right? If you think the NIL budget for North Carolina right now isn't competitive, wait until you say that Mack Brown's returning next year, right? Who is going to want to give money to this team if this is the product they put on the field, right? The other important thing is like in terms of stakeholders is like fan support, right? Like how many Carolina fans do you know, more general, not like the crazy folks like us that are just completely checked out, right? My fiance is a Carolina grad, and she had work today, but normally she's able to kind of step away and keep up to it. And I was giving her some text updates. She's just like, I'm good. You're good. You don't need to keep updating me. She's checked out. You looked at some other fans that like normally I have some friends that were going to come up for the UNC UVA game up here in Charlottesville. They texted me during the game. They're like, actually, I don't know if I really want to pay to go travel to see Carolina lose to UVA. Like the crazies, the donors, like we're still going, but like the general fans are checked out right now. And like you kind of need, and it's going to be a tough conversation, but I think Bubba has to do it. I think this has to be last season for Mack Brown. I think we're kind of at the end of the rope in terms of what we are accepting as a football product, especially at a pretty important time, given conference realignment and everything like that. I think that you're going to continue to lose the fan base. I think when the decision is made, you try to keep Mack on as much as you can from a fundraising, donor, ambassador standpoint.
Yeah.
But you need someone to outside of the Mack Brown coaching tree. It can't be someone that he picks. It can't be someone that is associated with his program or brand. It needs to be someone pretty young and energetic and refreshing because you're going to need people to buy in.
Yeah, I mean, you just look fan support and student support has always been an issue at UNC. It was massive when I was there. We were in there at two different times, but student section was empty in the second half. People started shuttling out there at the end of the first half. And then the stadium was pretty much empty by the fourth quarter, despite some valiant offensive effort by the Tar Heels. And fan support's always gonna be an issue for UNC football. Like that's always been an issue, always will be an issue. Now Mack Brown had things rolling with Sam and Drake because it was a good product. It was a fun offense. You always thought you had a chance. It could be against Wake Forest in the fourth quarter, or Virginia, or some of these massive games where you're down 2 scores. You have Drake or Sam with the ball in the fourth quarter. You're like, all right, we got a shot because we're the best quarterback on the field. It's not that way right now. If you don't, it shows you the importance of a good quarterback. And you've got to start thinking about NIL and donor support and building a culture of fans that want to watch UNC football, because it's always going to be an uphill battle. And so if the product sucks, you've got to just pull the plug. So it happened with Fedora, man. Fedora might have gotten 1 extra year. Despite going to the ACC championship game in 15, and they had Mitch Trubisky in 16. The next 2 years were awful. I think it was 5 wins in 2 years in 17, 18, and then pulled the plug, got the money to buy him out, and then brought in Mack. I think Mack did a great job. But it may be time, man. It may be time because it's stale. You can't figure it out on defense. Despite good recruiting, can't figure it out on defense. It's only going to get tougher without fan support and without NIL and competing in NIL, which I think they kind of have it maybe figured out. But I mean, look, is the average fan like you or I? Like, I'm not a big NIL guy. Our friends probably aren't huge NIL guys, but they may be in 10 years. Are they going to want to spend, spend maybe $5K a season, which I think the normal fan, not normal fan, but like the higher echelon fan will be asked to donate. I don't know. How about any guys that want to do that? They want to go to the game. They want to get Rams Club and have ticket priority, but they're not donating to NIL with this product. So that's the big question that Bubba's going to have to ask himself. I'm getting DMs, some crazy DMs about what's going on right now in the locker room. So who knows? They have some news in the next week or so. But
oh wow, okay.
I wouldn't think we'd have a decision on Mack right now.
No, I don't see that happening.
I would not. Yeah, so I'm like, I would not think that would happen now. I think he's earned the right to coach the season.
He has.
And I agree. Bring him on as an alumni, donor, ambassador, fundraiser extraordinaire. Give him an AD title.
Yep.
Keep him away from Kenan, except on game day.
Yeah, not in charge of timeouts or calling plays.
Yeah. What did it look like on TV copy? Anything on TV copy that like you took away? Because I always think you can learn more that way too.
Yeah, I think that what was interesting, they cut to him a few times and he just looked disconnected. Like kind of just kind of and again, not playing to the ages thing or anything like that, but like it just kind of like he seemed overwhelmed and just completely out of it. At least in the quick cuts they had to him. Obviously that's not representative of how he was involved with the game. But that was just my general impression, and obviously that's probably colored by what's happening on the field. It just seemed like the players weren't like they got hit in the face, punched in the face, and then didn't think that they didn't have a response for it, right? Like they weren't prepared for what if JMU actually puts up a fight. They got down 11-0 early, and then they took the lead 14-11. And I think their mindset was like, okay, cool, we've righted the ship. And then JMU's like, no, we actually came to play today, and they weren't prepared for it. And the rest was history. Yeah. Once it got 18-14, they kicked the onside kick, and it just hit our guy in the chest and bounced their way. That was when the team, I think, just kind of quit. It wasn't like a full quit, but it was just like we're actually not going to win this game. Yeah, man. Honestly, I mean, there's not too much to be said, right? The game itself was awful. It is a trend at this point of, I think our friend Brett Thompson had a great tweet where it's like, hey, first few weeks of the season, it's like, is Carolina's defense okay? Were we actually improving? And then, middle of the season is very much like oh no, we're actually not good. And then the end of the season is just chaotic. And that's what it feels like. We're on schedule, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of looking ahead. I think it was 4-0 heading into Duke. I mean, I was talking about it. I just didn't think JMU was that good. You only scored 13 against Gardner-Webb. You're like, okay, this is a new coach.
You said something interesting where, with Drake and Sam, it felt like Carolina always had a chance. I would make the counter argument as well that every team looks at Carolina with our defense and says they always have a chance. Every team that comes into Kenan, every team that gets Carolina at home knows at the end of the day that it doesn't matter how good UNC's offense is, that they are always going to have a chance because our defense will give up big plays.
Yeah, and you thought this was the year to be a little different because they look good against Minnesota. They're making plays, and they're, Bo Atkinson made some plays. Des Evans looked decent, but there's this defensive secondary, man. They were looking to the sideline to try to get the play in. They looked rattled. People were getting just beat, and then at that point you're questioning everything because they got you on the deep play. Okay, they're going to go underneath for a big chunk of yards. Once you kind of get beat a couple times in your head, I think, as a cornerback. So that's a big
If I had a dollar every time a secondary player personnel looked over the sideline to get confirmation of play over the last 5 seasons, I wouldn't need to go to business school. Like, it is a consistent problem where they are always seemed like they are on their back foot and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and that's on Jeff Collins and Charlton Warren. Charlton Warren's been here. He is the secondary coach, quarterbacks and safeties. And then also, I mean, it didn't look like UNC should have the better athletes, the better players. And it looked like JMU was just as good, if not better, in terms of an athletic standpoint, in terms of physicality. I think there's a toughness issue now we gotta think about. Everything you heard in the preseason, we came in very cautious about everything because we've been burned so many times with preseason hype. Now you question kind of everything about the toughness of this team, the resilience of this team. So it'll be interesting to see what this week sounds like, and then what they look like against Duke.
I wish I could make a bingo card for the post UNC game kind of discussion, because I feel like toughness and they wanted it more, those phrases are just free spaces every time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you got anything else? We're in 26 minutes. Just guys, if you're listening, tell a friend. If you're like, hey, good pod to listen to. Mike and Ross were going on about the UNC JMU game. It was up the day of the game.
Yeah.
2 hours after the game. Tell your friends, and then comment, rate, review, and then give us 5 stars. We need more reviews coming in because we're getting this thing rolling now. Mike coming in after PFT, JMU alum.
Yeah,
PFT.
hard to follow.
Yeah, we had he was talking some shit on Twitter, and then part of my take kind of
as is his right. I mean, look at the game.
I mean, look at this rundown: Adam Smith to PFT to Mike Hardison.
Oh yeah, just right up there, all the same level.
You and PFT are both Virginia natives.
Yeah.
So guys, we're gonna get this rolling here. So please rate, review, and just subscribing and following the show on the different platforms is helpful. Mike, anything else to close this out?
Nah, man. Sorry to all the fans that made the trip there.
Yeah, it was hot too, man. So I moved to the Blue Zone after. I was like, I almost left after the first half. I was like, I want to kind of get home, maybe get the show going. Don't make Mike have to wait. Get Mike get his night started. And I was like, man, I should kind of see what happens. And then I got offered a free Blue Zone ticket. So I left the press box. I'm not covering the team anymore. I grabbed a Modella. They wouldn't let me bring the Modella into the Blue Zone, which is weird. And I hung out with my buddy Clint Winslow, a new Big Hitters Only listener. So this was fun with him. All right, Mike. UNC falls 70-50 to JMU. They move to 3-1 in the overall for this season. They have their ACC opener on Saturday at 4 p.m. in Wallace Wade Stadium against a Duke team, which I think, let me check live right here.
They have Middle Tennessee State. They were 14.5 point favorites.
In Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm pulling the score right now because I know it's about halftime. Oh, that's basketball. That's not going to work here. This is podcast, baby. All right, ACC. Duke is up 28-10 against Middle Tennessee, so you would think they could pull away here. And Duke will be 4-0. UNC will be 3-1. Hey, if UNC can go into Durham and get a win, that's a step forward. That's 1-0 in the ACC. But we'll see after this game. We don't know what will happen. Appreciate you guys listening. Thank you, Mike, and thank you for all listening. Share this with friends. We'll talk to you next time on the Big Hitters Only podcast.